Hello, my name is Nahapetyan, and this is an undergraduate class on the US history, and the title of my lecture is "The War That Did Not Happen, Did America Save Turkey from the Soviet Union's Attack?" Before I start the main part of my lecture, let me ask a somewhat provocative maybe question. Do you think the Third World War could have been possible historically? Especially could it have been possible right after World War II was over? So let me first show you an article printed by the Washington Post on December 24 of 1945. The title of the article is Possible Third War Forecast. I'm quoting this news saying, Turkish press reports from Istanbul tonight forecast a possible Third World War if Russia persists in territorial claims against Turkey. One may say that this is just a newspaper piece referring to other Turkish newspapers, particularly Tanin and Vatan are quoted in this Washington Post publication. This is not a very substantial evidence, which technically, as a historian, we might agree. However, let me quote another source. This time it's President Harry Truman's advisor, Clark Clifford. His memorandum was prepared in 1946 for the US administration. The Clifford memorandum began as follows. The gravest problem facing the US today is that of American relations with the Soviet Union. The solution of that problem may determine whether or not there will be a Third World War. End of quote. I assume we all agree that the two combined sources might leave the impression that the Third World War was not excluded in theory. So let us explore some nuances, some details of 1945. On February 23 of that year, which was the 2002nd day of war, I computed, Turkey declared war on Nazi Germany. The USSR, one of the key allies of the fight against the Axis powers, did not welcome this move, but they called it a belated action. And I'm quoting Soviet government sources. The change in Turkey's policy should not be overrated, since the issue of the war against Germany had been predetermined thanks to the heroic efforts of the Red Army and the Allies. However, even though the step taken by Ankara was belated, at the end of the day, at least it wasn't against Soviet Union's interest, right? So the reaction could have been maybe somewhat different. But why Moscow chose to react in this way, I would see it as a preamble to more decisive actions, more clear policy from the Soviet Union against Turkey that would follow soon. We get answer to these questions pretty soon. In March and later in June of 1945, the Soviet foreign minister, or as they would refer to it, the People's Commissar of Foreign Affairs, Vyacheslav Molotov, and the Turkish ambassador to Soviet Union, Selim Sarper, met twice. Molotov reminded that the Soviet-Turkish Treaty on Friendship, signed in 1925, was about to expire soon, and in order to extend it, Turkey had to meet certain preconditions. And the preconditions were the following. To set up a Soviet Navy base in Turkish straits, Bosphorus and Dardanelles straits, which, as we know, connect Black Sea to Mediterranean and to basically to the international oceans. To revise the Montreux Convention of 1936, I'll talk about Montreux soon, and to secede two provinces, Kars and Ardahan, of the northeastern corner of Turkey, that shared border with the USSR, with Soviet Armenia and Soviet Georgia, respectively. So for a piece of background information, what's Montreux Convention? It was signed in 1936 in the town of Montreux of Switzerland, and regulated the passage of ships through these waterways, Bosphorus and Dardanelles. The Soviet Union was against Montreux and demanded more rights and kind of, in a way, more control. And in regards to Kars and Ardahan, these two provinces historically were part of the Armenian kingdom, but in 16th century Ottoman army conquered it, in 1878 as a result of a war, one of many wars, as you might know, between Russia and Turkey. The Russian Empire captured Kars and Ardahan, but in 1817, because of revolution in Russia, the Russian soldiers left this geography, and by 1921, newly emerging Turkish Republic reconquered these provinces. In Potsdam, in the summer of 1945, Joseph Stalin brought up all these demands when Stalin met his American and British counterparts, President Truman and Winston Churchill, who was, as we know, replaced by Attlee because Churchill's party lost elections back in Great Britain. Joseph Stalin stated in regards to Montreux Convention, Turkey holds a knife at Russia's throat. I can imagine the reaction of Great Britain concerning Gibraltar Strait, or the US concerning the Panama Canal if an identical situation occurred. Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Morotov followed up saying in 1921 Turks used the weakness of Soviet Russia and seized part of Soviet Armenia. Armenians felt insulted for these reasons. The Soviet government raised the question regarding returning the territories that legally belonged to them. And by the way, I have the original and the very first edition of the US diplomatic papers in regards to the conference in Potsdam. From the very beginning, Great Britain supported Turkey and not Stalin's demands, but the policy of the United States was different because, as you may understand, the Potsdam Conference happened after Germany surrendered, but before Japan surrendered in September would surrender in 1945 September, and therefore U.S. was more concerned with still existing fights against still resisting last Axis power, which was Japan. And by the way, Soviet Union and United States were allies in this war because in early days of August of 1945, the Red Army attacked Japanese army. But soon Japan surrendered, and next to joy that the war was over, we can detect one more very important thing. The situation in which Soviet Union and United States of America were allies basically ceased to exist because the war was over. Another important shift that happened was that, as we know, United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs in August of 1945 on 2 Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and America, as a result, emerged as the only back then power in the world that possessed nuclear weapon, because Soviet Union, it would take another 4 years before Soviet Union would develop its own nuclear arsenal. So in this new environment, America revisited its international priorities, and the policy towards Turkey became subject to strategic reconsiderations. President Truman's aide, Clark Clifford, whose memorandum I have quoted already, and George Kennan, an American diplomat stationed in Moscow, wrote memorandums and cables highlighting the importance to contain Soviet Union. These documents started to influence the United States foreign policy. Especially important is George Kennan's 8,000-word telegram sent from Moscow in February of 1946, which is considered a critically important document that laid the foundation of the Cold War policy. Soon after the document arrived, the United States government made its reconsiderations. The decisions to support Turkey were in place, and American government found a very interesting, creative way how to highlight its support. In 1944, Turkish ambassador to United States died in Washington, and in March of 1946, suddenly the U.S. government remembered about the death of Ambassador Ertegun, and his body, the coffin itself, was shipped on board a Missouri warship, which was one of the most powerful American warships. Missouri arrived in April of 1946. I am quoting Washington Post. With all the ceremony and friendly welcomes, there is a question on the lips of every Turk you meet. Is there a political significance to the Missouri visit? Admiral Hewitt, who was on board of Missouri, replied none. However, now the website of the U.S. Navy's History Office mentions Missouri's presence also served another purpose to emphasize to the Soviet Union and to other nations the United States' concern about political instability in the region. On March 12 of 1947, President Harry Truman gave his famous speech in Congress outlining the foreign policy program known as Truman Doctrine. And the president made clear that the U.S. government was going to support Turkey and Greece. Would the Soviet Union choose to enforce its demands to Turkey if not America's support? Many sources contain information about Soviet diplomatic and military preparations that might favor such an option. I'm highlighting some historical developments happening between 1945 and 1947 that speak in favor of possible military actions. Red Army troops concentrated in Soviet Armenia and Soviet Georgia, just opposite Kars and Ardahan. In July and August of 1946, the Soviet Army conducted maneuvers and fired guns next to Turkish border. The estimated number of Red Army soldiers in the Transcaucasian republics, meaning Armenia, Georgia, possibly also Soviet Azerbaijan, reached 175,000. The USSR also had over 200,000 soldiers in Bulgaria, which also shares border with Turkey. Socialist Bulgaria itself dispatched its own troops, closer to the state boundaries with Turkey. In July of 1945, the Bulgarian officials in frontier districts were said to be evacuating all women and children. Bulgaria even shut down its border gates with Turkey at a certain point and stopped issuing exit visas to Turkish citizens. US diplomatic sources also reported that the Soviet Union increased the number of its soldiers in northern Iran because, based on the agreement between Iran, Soviet Union, and Great Britain, in the summer of 1941, Soviet troops were deployed in the northern area of Iran, and British troops were stationed in the southern geography of Iran in order to preclude any possible aggression from Nazi Germany against Iran. These troops were supposed to be pulled back 6 months after war is over. So, as we learn from American diplomatic cables, Soviet Union was actually increasing the number of its soldiers near the Mount Ararat geography, which is right at the border between Iran, Turkey, and also Soviet Union. And also, as we learn from American diplomatic cable, large barracks under construction day and night. No one, unless authorized, is allowed near. A Bulgarian colonel who returned from Moscow stated that Red Army generals commonly speak about a sudden massive attack against Turkey. Another Czech officer attending general staff courses in Moscow mentioned military problems under study predominantly concerned an offensive against Turkey. The Turkish government replied that with or without the United Nations, which was emerging in those days, Turkey would fight to retain its present territory and sovereignty. I'm quoting a Turkish source here. And there are more events and statements that speak in favor of possible military action. Why didn't the war happen? We already spoke about the Truman Doctrine, and I'm quoting Russian Soviet academic physicist Yuri Khoriton. The US nuclear arsenal can be credited for averting, if not World War III, then at least Turkey's likely defeat. As said earlier, America was the only state that possessed a nuclear arsenal until 1949, when the USSR tested its atomic bomb. I also personally think that there was a wasted time and moment of hesitation in the Soviet Union, because at the early stage before American policy was changed, there was no practical resistance coming from the United States government, and had Stalin taken any action during particularly the second half of 1945, neither Turkey nor Great Britain would not be in a position to resist to Red Army's possible operation. I'm still exploring the reasons why this time was wasted. I'm reading, writing, and researching on this topic. And those are my 3 R's: reading, writing, and researching. And I'm echoing the 3 R's that exist in one of the reading assignments of this week. Thank you.